This.
Okay, you can touch it.
Yay.
Bring the screen right there?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna full screen it if I can.
Well, actually, it's recording the presentation, the window.
It's sharing. Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm John Settle. Thanks for coming out on this muggy morning. I'm going to give a history of Kempsville. The way this is going to work is I'm going to start with a generalized timeline going all the way back. Then we're going to break away and look at a couple of buildings that used to be here in Kempsville. Some are still standing. And then we're going to jump back into the timeline, proceed into the 19th century, look at a couple more buildings, and then finish up. So before we go into the history, we have to know the prehistory. You don't need to read this wall of text. All you need to know is that prior to the arrival of Europeans, archaeologists suggest this area has been occupied by people for about 11 to 12,000 years. When the Europeans got here, the native peoples that they encountered were primarily Algonquin speaking. They are believed to have been the remnants of the Chesapeake tribe that had been massacred by the Powhatan Confederacy in the decades prior to 1607.
A little louder, please.
A little louder? Okay. So by the time we get to the 17th century, this area is known as Kemp's Landing. It's earned this name because George Kemp was the first European to purchase land in this area in 1652.
John, if you could raise your voice just a tad.
Okay.
Are you speaking?
Do we need the mic?
Damon, can you got the mic?
Sorry about that, guys. No worries. It's awesome. Well,
That's us, not you, so we just.
Okay.
A question about George Kemp. Was that a land grant from the beginning?
That is, no one knows. No one knows if that was a land grant or if he purchased that land from someone who the land was granted to. The jury's still out on that information. I don't think that information survives. We will also have time for Q&A at the end if we have more questions. Right on.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. And a little soft spoken.
You got enough light in there, John? I mean, Dave.
Yeah.
Testing. Is that better? Okay, great. Starting to get nervous there for a minute. Okay, so George Kemp purchased his land here in about 1652, here at the headwaters of the eastern branch of the Elizabeth River. The area becomes known Kemp's Landing because of its affiliation with him. At the time, this area was located in what was known as Lower Norfolk County. From this county, Princess Anne County was formed in 1691. By the end of the 1600s, the record suggests that Kempsville was a flourishing village, complete with a deep water landing, a drawbridge, as well as tobacco warehouses that lined either side of the river. And this is confirmed by the archaeological record as well. Now, going into the 1700s or the 18th century, tobacco is the predominant industry in Virginia, and it's no exception in Kemp's Landing. Tobacco is a highly lucrative industry, and as with any lucrative industry, there's always a propensity for fraud. To combat this fraud, in the 1730s, the General Assembly passed what was called the Tobacco Inspection Act. In essence, what this did was in every county in Virginia, it established 2 or 3 tobacco inspection or public warehouses, wherein all tobacco that was prepared for export had to go to a single warehouse prior to exportation. This is because people were passing bad tobacco. So this act, although it was enacted in 1730, really doesn't go into full swing until 1740. Kemp's Landing was one of these locations that was designated as having a public warehouse for tobacco. Now, the exception is that whereas most counties had 2 to 3 of these, Kemp's Landing was the only one for all of Princess Anne County, which meant that all the tobacco had to be funneled through one village. So Kemp's Landing is now booming. So we're going to continue a little further here. So now we're in the early 1700s. So when Linda asked me to put together this presentation, she wanted me to prepare something that would illustrate what Kempsville would have looked like around the time Emmanuel Episcopal Church was founded. Well, the earliest imagery that we have of Kempsville isn't from 1843, it's actually from 1918. This map here is a hand-drawn map prepared by Mary Shelborg in the 1980s. She drew this map of Kempsville as she remembered it from 1918 when she was 5 years old. It remains to this day the earliest illustration that we have of Kempsville as a whole. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get crafty. Her notes on each of these houses or buildings are very descriptive. Using this as well as other resources, we can more or less conclusively remove buildings that we know were not here when we're not here until after Emmanuel Episcopal Church was founded. So let's exclude those. We're left with these. So let's now reorient ourselves so that north is up. And now let's label this. So we're right here. This is Bonnie Road now, Witch Duck Road. This is Kempsville Road. This is Princeton Road. Used to be, now it's Singleton Way. Overland Road. This is Lord Dunmore Drive. The eastern branch of Elizabeth River, Parliament Drive, and so on. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this map and we're going to overlay it with the earliest aerial photography that we have of Kempsville. So this is from 1958. Again, you're still here. We've got Kempsville Road right there, Bonnie Road, now South Witch Duck, Overland, etc. There were two areas of the hand-drawn map that did not fit. I've broken these out into exhibits just so that we can talk about those buildings. So let's go ahead and start with the first one, which is right down here. Okay, so this is Fairfields. There's now a housing development there, the same name. This is probably the earliest building that we have a record of in Kempsville. It's definitely the oldest one that we have pictures of. The history of Fairfield Plantation goes back to the 1690s. The executors of the estate of Thomas Walk were charged with assembling a plantation for Anthony Walk, his youngest son, so that he would have a plantation by the time of his adulthood. This is the tomb of Anthony Walk here. This is the house that he is believed to have built approximately 1720. It was the primary dwelling house at Fairfield until the completion of a subsequent house, which we'll get to in a moment. After the completion of the manor house of Fairfield, this was turned into a kitchen quarter, which housed servants such as this woman right here. This is believed to be an enslaved individual in this photograph. This was taken during the Civil War. This is the present site of the old Fairfield house. It was demolished in 1972. I hope that's no one's house here. We're going to jump ahead in time just to finish the Fairfield segment. The manor house in Fairfield was probably built about 1750. It likely resembled this house. This is Milton in Middlesex County. We have no photographs of the old Fairfield house. We don't even know where it was located, but we do have two hand-drawn illustrations of it, which appear here. These are from the 1800s. This house is believed to have been built by Anthony Walk II, portrayed here. He was the wealthiest man in Princess Anne County. He owned thousands of acres. He owned close to 100 slaves. He was the epitome of 18th century wealth in this region.
Did you add to that about where the greater part of the wealth came from, the land?
Yes, it's a common misconception that the more land you had, the more wealthy you were in this time. That's not true. Slaves were the primary concentration. They were the commodities that held the highest value of anything else in Virginia. Slaves were worth more than the plantations on which they worked. So it was not a matter of acreage. It never was. It was how much labor you had at your disposal, because you could not only own that labor, but you could lease it to others as well.
And how many slaves did he have?
I believe the highest number was close to 100. I think it was 89. Yeah, 89. And that was, I can't remember what year that assessment was taken.
How did you spell his name?
Anthony Walk,
Yeah.
Walke. Okay, so now we're going to go back in time a little bit. We're back to the early 17th century or 18th century. We're going to talk about this building here. This one specifically. This is the only image that we have of this building. We know nothing about it, other than it was probably built before 1730. It was purchased in 1910 by Milton Yoder, who was, by the way, the father of the founders of Yoder Dairy. He lived in this house for about 4 years while he was building this massive house. This is from a 1914 newspaper article. He tore this down in 1914. Thank goodness the photographer took a picture of at least the side of this house. If you look here, you can kind of see two lines on the gable. Well, these are remarkably similar to this house. This is the Weblen House in Virginia Beach off of Newtown Road, where they did the exact same thing. I would speculate that this house was probably built around 1720 as well. But that's it. That's all that we know about that mystery house. It was located right here, and now it's gone. Okay, so now we're going to jump across town to this little house up here, way up Bonnie Road. It's the Caraway House. We've all probably seen this house. The photograph to the left is from 1913, courtesy of the Caraway family. This is from the 1980s. This house was built approximately 1734 by members of the Caraway family. It is without question one of, if not the oldest frame house in this area. It was occupied for 250 years by the Caraway family until 1977. It was then used as an office, and then I believe it's a cafe now. Oh, I always forget. It was originally located here. In 1969, it had to be moved to its new site, which made it ineligible for nomination to the National Register until 2019. Hard to believe, right? So now we're going to jump to this house to the left of the Baptist church. This house almost didn't make the cut. There is only one source that suggests that this house predates the Revolutionary War. All we know about it is what it looks like in this aerial imagery. If you have pictures of this house at home, please call me. I'd like to see it. I speculate it may date to the early to mid 18th century. All that we know about it was that by 1918, it was lived in by the Montague family, and it was torn down in 1998 to make way for the Kempsville Baptist Church Gymnasium. So now we're going to jump behind the image here to this house, moving up in the 1700s. So this is known almost ubiquitously as the Kempsville Baptist Church parsonage. Although it was built much earlier for different purposes, the original portion of the home is believed to be this section right here, dating to the early to mid 1700s. It was believed to have been a tavern at one point, before how times have changed. Then it became a dwelling, and then it became the Baptist Church parsonage for a very long time. This is a very rare photograph looking north on Bonnie Road, now Witchduck Road. We can kind of see the front of this house and the periphery of this image. Not a paved street in sight. Present site of this house today. Okay, so now we're going to go down Bonnie Road to the corner here. There's a lot of information floating around in this house. It's referred to almost every time in the records as the Victory Ball House. And this is because to commemorate the victory of the Americans at the Battle of Great Bridge, a ball was supposed to have been held in this house. Other sources claim it was to celebrate the signing of the Declaration of Independence. What we do know is there was a big party here. It definitely dates to the mid 1700s. By the 1930s, it had been heavily modernized. We know that it was for decades the home of the Herrick family, who operated a grocery here in Kempsville. It was torn down sometime between 1958 and 1963 and was located here. This monument actually commemorates the existence of this house. Okay, so now we're going to go down Princess Anne Road to this building here. This house is a real mystery. It's referred to in 1970s newspaper coverage as the Aaron Hunt House, but the same sources do not cite where they obtained that information. In any case, it's the earliest name that we can assign to this building, since it no longer exists. The same source identifies this little addition right here which we can kind of see as having been an 18th century apothecary shop, which is an equivalent to a pharmacist today. Definitely mid 1700s. One source said that this house was built in 1680. If that was true, this house would have been moved to the Smithsonian. Definitely was not that old. Later, though, in the 1800s, it was actually the home for many years of Oscar B. Mears, who was for decades the superintendent of Princess Anne County Schools. Until his death, it was then sold to the Herbert family, and then it was in ruin by the 1960s, when it was subsequently torn down sometime after 1970. That's the present site of this building. Now we're going to jump across the street to, well, that over there. We all probably know, have seen this house. This is Pleasant Hall. Note the construction date of 1763. That is the now DHR's most generally accepted construction date for this home, which conflicts with all the signage and what everybody says about it being either 1769 or 1779. We know it was built most likely by George Logan, who was a local merchant here in Kempsville, as well as a pretty big landlord. After the skirmish of Kempsville, George Logan actually hosted the Royal Governor of Virginia in this house. At that point, he had shown his true colors to the villagers of Kemp's Landing, who were starkly opposed to the British. He was then caused to flee to Britain, and his home was confiscated by the state. After the war, it was sold at public auction. It was purchased by a man named Peter Singleton, who was a very wealthy individual himself. He lived here for the duration of his life until it was sold out of that family. I believe the Walk family actually purchased it for a time after that. It was sold again around the turn of the 19th into the 20th century to Dr. Robert Whitehead. He actually operated a medical practice in a small building to the left of the house. There's actually folks still walking around today who were treated by Dr. Robert Whitehead. For many years, he was operating in Kempsville. We have some more photographs of Pleasant Hall. By the end of the 20th century, this house was in a state of disrepair. The heirs of Robert Whitehead actually sold this house to a few entrepreneurs who initially wanted to turn it into a restaurant. This apparently fell through and it became a funeral home. It was then purchased by Kempsville Baptist Church, and now it is its own church today. It's the only house on this list with a happy ending, if you ask me. So now we're going to go to this building right here. I'm sorry, this is a typo. It should actually read Kinline, not Kinzinger. I don't know why I put that there, but this was built after 1765 by John Michael Kinline. He was an upholsterer by trade. He resided in this house until he died in approximately 1782. He left it to the Campbell family. He had no children of his own. Subsequently, it was owned by the Dozier family. That it was purchased by an individual who turned it into a tavern. It remained in that use for many years. It was then purchased by Dr. Thomas Hunt, a local medical doctor. And what we know is that by, I think it was 1892, it was being used as the Emmanuel Episcopal Church Rectory. Okay.
And it was right down here on our point of land, right over here. Yes.
It's the present side of that building today. It's right here. Okay, so now we're going to jump back into the timeline. It's the 1770s. Kemp's Landing is now on the map. Literally. It's the first time we see Kemp's Landing on any map anywhere. This map of approximate origin in the 1770s. So a few years later, Kemp's Landing is bustling so much that Lynn Haven Parish is actually advertising in the Virginia Gazette for bids for building a chapel here in Kempsville. 70 years prior to Emmanuel Episcopal Church being founded, which I think is really interesting to find. It apparently didn't pan out. 1775, the revolution starts. We are very interestingly not connected here in Kempsville as having been the host to the skirmish of Kempsville or the Battle of Kemp's Landing. There's two different names assigned to it. I won't go into the specifics of that, and it's very well documented. But what we do need to stress here is that it is in every source, it's recited that John Ackus, a local Minuteman, was killed, and that his death is believed to be the first Virginia casualty of the Revolutionary War, right here in Kempsville.
Excuse me, question.
Yes, sir.
2 slides back, but you showed the map of Kempsville. Wasn't that, was that a church or?
Yes, this is labeled on the map as Princess Anne Church. That is actually Old Donation Church. This road that we see proceeding from Kemp's Landing is Connie Road, which was initially the road that went to what's now Old Donation Church.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay, so now 3 years into the Revolutionary War, Princess Anne County votes by popular referendum to move the county court from nearby Newtown to Kemp's Landing. Which if we thought that Kempsville or Kemp's Landing, the only tobacco inspection port in the county, was busy then, well, now it's got the port and the courthouse. So it's teeming at the seams right now. So much so that in 1781, we get probably our most notable or esteemed historic figure visiting town. Benedict Arnold actually came here. He was looking to garner public support for the British cause. I think this was just a mask. At the time, we know he was developing a map of this area to get a better handle on controlling North Carolina. This is a 1781 map prepared by him and his engineers. To note, we have the second time we ever see Kemp's Landing on any map is actually this publication. I think it's funny though that the same year we have a similar map published by the opposing side. This was prepared same year by French engineers assisting in the Yorktown campaign, also illustrating Kemp's Landing. Okay, so now in 1783, the Revolutionary War is over, but things are still happening in Kempsville. The General Assembly the same year actually passed an act formally incorporating the village of Kemp's Landing into the town of Kempsville. So now the name Kempsville is born. This act specifies that a board of trustees had to be created. They were to lay out the 60-acre town into 120 half-acre lots, and that they were to sell these lots at public auction. The purchasers of these lots were then required to build a house on them within 3 years, where those lots would revert, the ownership of the lots would revert to the board of trustees. There is no record of any subdivision plat laying out a town ever having been created. One was definitely not recorded. I personally believe that one doesn't exist. And I say this because the deed research suggests that instead of laying out the town in a grid formation, what ended up happening is that the board of trustees and the town's wealthy landowners and surrounding landowners simply just defied the Virginia General Assembly's order and sold land as they had through metes and bounds, as they had been doing for over 120 years. So now we're going to jump back into the buildings. We're going to look at this building up here off Overland Road. So as I mentioned earlier, 1778, the county votes to move the court to Kempsville. So initially there was no courthouse here. So where did they meet? Well, they met in people's homes and in warehouses until this building was completed in 1787. This is the fourth Princess Anne County courthouse. It housed the Princess Anne County Court until about 1823, when the citizens voted again to move the court to its present location down in Princess Anne. After this point, the building itself was sold to Kempsville Baptist Church, who used it as their house of worship until about 1911, when they built their building right across the street here. This building was then abandoned for a number of years. It was purchased by a retired judge who attempted to restore it. As we can see in this image here, we can see scaffolding all around this building. Remember Dr. Robert Whitehead? It's the man himself right there. At any rate, this man's, not Robert Whitehead's, the judge's attempt to restore this building were unsuccessful, and by the 1950s, the building was in ruin again. It was unfortunately torn down in 1971. This is the present site of that building today. If you see this cemetery to the left here, that's actually the Kempsville Baptist Church cemetery, left over from when they were using the building. We have another building right here behind the courthouse that we're going to go into, and this was the jail. This was completed a year later in 1788. It was used as a jail again until the courthouse moved in 1823. After which point, as we see in this photograph, it was being used as a schoolhouse. It maintained that use until about 1877. Then it lay in ruin for a number of years, and then Dr. Robert Whitehead, that figure again, purchased it and actually converted it into a dwelling for his son and daughter-in-law. It was used as a dwelling until about the 1950s, when it went into ruin again and then was torn down in, I think, 1974. The present site of that building. Okay, so now jumping back into the timeline. So now it's the 1800s. This is a 1812 map of the area. This is the first time we see Kempsville as opposed to Kemp's Landing on a map. And then further along in the 1800s, we get to 1823 again, as I alluded, when the court moved again from Kempsville to Princess Anne. This is really the beginning of the end of Kempsville. In spite of this, however, Kempsville does maintain its status as a major transportation hub. This image here shows that it's at the nexus of about 7 different roads in the county. And by 1835, at least one account identifies that there was a school, a handful of stores, approximately 27 homes in Kempsville, and an estimated population of 200 people. I don't know how they fit 200 people into 27 houses. So we're going to move to the last building on this list.
Before you move on, you said the beginning of the end was the fact of larger shipping vessels and stuff like that. What forced the major part of town to move away from here?
The primary reason was that there was no courthouse here anymore. Another was that tobacco was no longer the primary cash crop at that time. Agriculture had diversified. There was also, we were becoming less dependent on the eastern branch of the Elizabeth River for shipping. Those are just a handful of factors.
Thank you.
Last building on this list, I think we all have heard of this building. Emmanuel Protestant Episcopal Church. Everyone here, I'm sure, is well versed in its history, but it was built on land given by David Walk in 1842. The church was completed by 1843. It was consecrated by Bishop William Meade, and it was, by all accounts, a staple in the Kempsville area for 100 years until not long after celebrating its centennial, it burned. The 1940s, fortunately, it was reconstructed in much of the same footprint and materials, and by all accounts, remains a staple of the Kempsville community today.
John, would you mention David Walk's wishes for his slaves?
Yes,
after death?
yes. So David Walk, he died in 1854. He was a slaveholder, much like his father and grandfather. He, however, had a more enlightened approach to slavery. He actually taught his slaves how to read, which was illegal at that time. He also believed that upon his death, all of his slaves should be set free. However, in codifying that in his will, he noted that upon either or his wife or his wife's death, my slaves shall be freed and their passage to, I believe it was Liberia was the country, be funded. In other words, he felt that they should be transported back to their homeland in Africa. There's lots of varying opinions on that alone, but that's how it's well read. I suppose it was all for nothing though, because his wife outlived him. She did not die until the 1880s, so his slaves will unfortunately have to wait until 1865 to be freed. So now I'm going to finish out with this. This last slide, we've got 2 very important people within the context of this presentation. On the left is Bishop William Meade, the man who consecrated this church. And on the right is the tombstone of David Walk, who was the man who gave the land for this church. Why am I showing you this? Well, the 2 men were actually close friends. In fact, they were cousins. They knew each other for a very long period of time. They were very close. And I'm bringing this up because it was actually reported in the early 20th century that Kempsville was second to Williamsburg in the highest concentration of pre-Revolutionary War buildings in Virginia. Now there's only 2 of them left, which is astounding. And it kind of reminds me of this quote from Bishop William Meade from 1857, and I'll read it to you. He writes, "I passed through the length and breadth of Glen Haven Parish more than 20 years ago in the company of my friend David Meade Walk, the son of the old minister of this parish, who is well acquainted with its past history and present condition, and able to inform me whose were once the estates through which we passed, and into whose hands they had gone, who could point me to the ruins of family seats, which had been consumed by fire, could tell me what were the causes of the bankruptcy and ruin and untimely death of those who once formed the gay society of this county, cards, the bottle, the horse race, the continual feasts. These were the destroyers. In no part of Virginia has the destruction of all that was old been greater. This was in 1857. And it's still happening today. So kind of a somber note, but that concludes the history to 1843. I'd be happy to take any questions you guys have. Yes, ma'am.
When did it change from Emmanuel, Protestant to Emmanuel?
I don't conclusively know the answer to that. I know that newspaper coverage from the 1890s still identified it as Emmanuel Protestant Episcopal. So I'd say sometime shortly after that.
Still is,
Yeah.
It still
it
is.
still is in the legal document.
Just-
Okay, gotcha.
Oh,
Evidently, it still is.
Mother would be proud. It's a Protestant.
Other questions, jump on this. We're going to be talking about the wealth of history that we stood on here in our background of becoming a beloved community. But this is the part that I would say the majority of us absolutely know the least about. And we've got a wonderful opportunity to ask some questions. So jump in. Nothing is out of reach.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm always surprised that the water, we lost all that water, and most places are having trouble because they're flooding or they're losing their land because it's coming in. What caused our water to go?
Farming practices. Yeah, prior to no-till agriculture, anytime if a farmer turned over his field and you experienced a significant rain event, the dirt was exposed. The rain pushed the dirt into the river. If you don't practice regular dredging, you're not going to get that back. Now, this was known, or this was identified in Kempsville as a problem as early as the 1850s. There was actually an effort. I know we're getting beyond 1853 or 43 here. But there was actually an endeavor to construct a canal in Kempsville that would have connected the eastern branch of the Elizabeth River with the western branch of the Lynnhaven River. This continued intermittently until about the 1870s. It was a private endeavor. It simply lost funding. It just was never completed. Yes, sir.
What do you know about the canal that allegedly goes from here to the courthouse?
Oh, so that's actually, it's inconclusive to my mind or to my knowledge as to whether or not that was a canal or if that was an actual geologic feature that was probably manipulated by man at some point, but that's referred to as Fox Run. I don't know that it actually went all the way to the courthouse. If it did, I certainly wasn't aware of that. If you know anything about that, I'd love to know.
I'm going on folklore and fairy tales.
Gotcha. Yeah. A lot of that around here. Yeah, Fox Run, I believe, is the name of that feature.
Is it the water back here behind what is now the condo apartment situation and between there and Fairfield? Is any part of that tied to Fox Run? Because I've seen things with that water's identified, the one that goes under Kempsville Road over. Is any of that tied to the Fox Run?
The one that goes underneath Lord Dunmore, like right after you come around the bend there, that I believe is connected to Fox Run. There was, I know, getting back to your question, sir, I know there was a finger that was dug connecting that to another creek that ultimately fed to the North Landing River. That was man-made, I know that much. I think I've answered your question. Now, I will add this, I'm sorry. I will add this. When it comes to creeks, fingers and creeks around here, really the definitive resource are topographic maps, but the topographers, they frequently, I don't know why, they mislabel water features to the point where one year it has one name and another year it has another. It makes it virtually impossible to track. It's very frustrating from a research perspective. I'd like to get to you, but I saw her raise her hand first. Yes, ma'am.
So that Fox Run thing, we think that's the creek that runs back through, well, it runs through my neighborhood back through Brookfield and along Brandywine and then parallels Princess Anne Road.
All connected. Yes, ma'am. Some parts of it are actually underground now. They were reinforced with some reinforced concrete pipe from what I've seen. A lot of it was heavily meddled with when Kempsville Colony and those neighborhoods were developed, as we would expect in any land development operation, but they're all supposedly connected. I believe you had a question.
Yeah, and it was actually prior to development of this area. Where did the indigenous people get displaced?
Well, you're talking about in this region?
Yeah.
We We don't know. So the sort of the Native American prehistory aspect of it, all that we know kind of picks up where Chief Powhatan is uniting the Algonquin speaking people of Tidewater. I want to say it was in the 1570s or 80s. One of his spiritual advisors tells him that his rule will come to an end by a great people from the east. Well, how prophetic. He, however, his home was in Foster Point. That's where he lived. He misinterpreted this to mean the Chesapeake peoples, as they were the furthest east Algonquin-speaking tribe. He had attempted and contacted them to try to get them to join the Powhatan Confederacy for years. They refused to do so. So his response was to massacre them. By the time the settlers got here, they encountered very disorganized, very sort of niche groupings of Native Americans, which suggests to both the settlers as well as archaeologists today and anthropologists that these were probably people that were recovering from a massive war. So to answer your question, we don't know if they've stayed here, but they had been greatly impacted by some event, most likely Chief Powhatan.
For themselves.
It was a war among the Algonquins, yes. Yeah.
The picture of the monument, where is that?
So originally this monument, and I showed a picture of it at Fairfield, it was located in Fairfield, off of Lord Dunmore and Lock Lane. In the 1930s, 20s or 30s, all of the walk tombstones were moved from Fairfield to Old Nation Church for safekeeping. So that's why it's at Old Nation Church today.
That was what my hand was up for, so I put it back down. To ask you to, since we're on the walk plantation land right here, and there are no walks buried around here. I was gonna ask him to tell you where the walks were buried and where those stones are moved, but if there's anything to add more than that, please go for it, John.
They're still out there. The bodies were left behind, kind of like that movie Poltergeist, right?
I think they become interested.
Yeah. Kind of not bringing it back to the Native American thing, but bringing it full circle. Both David Walk and David Mead, or Bishop William Mead, were both direct descendants of Chief Powhatan. Yeah.
Out the port of Kemp's Landing, how big did that get and what size ships could it handle and stuff like that?
Oh, I'm not an expert of nautical history, but it was a deep water port, meaning it could accommodate just about anything. The British Navy was at Kemp's Landing, so it was a full-fledged port. This was a seaport town.
But get down.
Now you can't get a canoe down the creek at low tide.
Okay, so I'm trying to just picture why this happened. So did the decline of Kempsville occur because of the land management thing, that the water just, literally the water went away?
No,
I can't imagine a deep water port anywhere.
I know.
around that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm going, so where was this tobacco thing and where was this deep water port? 'Cause
Well, we don't-
You said we can't get a canoe down the creek.
I'm getting two questions. So the first one was where the tobacco warehouse was. We don't know, but we do know that all the warehouses were right on the water, as that's the only place you could put a warehouse back then that made sense. We know it was somewhere over there. We know that the inspector was a fully bonded and appointed official. I mean, if you were a fraudster inspector, you were going to jail for a long time. It was a legitimate operation, it was a serious operation. So somewhere over along, definitely on this side of the water, but somewhere along that creek, what's now a creek. The first part of that question, what caused Kempsville's decline? Well, it was a multitude of things. It was that there was no need following the Revolutionary War for a tobacco inspection warehouse in Kempsville anymore. Tobacco was no longer the cash crop. The courthouse had moved by the beginning of the 19th century. But despite this, Kempsville remained a transportation hub. It was still a major crossroads, and this continued up until the early to mid 20th century. What really led to Kempsville's demise from a historical perspective is just land development. There was a lot of demand to live in Kempsville. A lot of people refer to the 50s and 60s as the golden age of Kempsville, because it was just, it was booming, houses were being built everywhere. Which is great, it gave us all a home, but at the same time, it unfortunately led to the destruction of something we'll never get back. So it really, I don't think Kempsville really ever declined. I think it just had its ups and downs. And we're here where we are today, where Kempsville's I think they said in the 90s that if you separated Kempsville from the rest of the city of Virginia Beach, it would be like the fifth largest city in Virginia. Yes. Yes, sir.
You had told us that the courthouse moved from here down to where the courthouse is now.
Yes, sir.
What was the motivation for that? What was happening down there?
That's a good question. So in the early 19th century, early 1800s, there was a lot of push by the Virginia General Assembly to get localities to move their courthouses from the population centers to the geographic centers. And the reason for this was too many people were working their way out of jury duty by saying, I'm not driving from Knox Island to Kempsville. So the General Assembly said, look, you need to start pushing, to move your courthouses to the very center so that it was more equitable for people to go to court. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's something, one little thing that I've learned from talking to John and over time with this is what I pictured is this Kempsville alone actually goes farther when you talk about the water, that Pleasant Point area that's out off Newtown Road, all of that goes back to what was deeper water in that time period. I kept thinking of just simply right up here where the bridge was, just up the street from us, and he opened my eyes to thinking of Kempsville is out further. Is that correct?
So yeah, at the area that you're referring to, Linda, is Newtown. That's where the courthouse was prior to Kempsville. This was really the population center of the county by the end of the 17th century, start of the 18th century. What killed Newtown was the Tobacco Inspection Act that put the warehouse here. No one wanted to go there anymore if they had to bring their tobacco over here. I'm sure that the people who were living in Newtown were very miffed by that legislation because it made more sense to put it here because it was further upriver. Everyone else in Princess Anne County was just glad that they didn't have to ride their horse 2 more miles to get to Newtown, I'm sure. But that, yeah, Newtown also bustling. In fact, those Native American artifacts I showed at the beginning of this, that was even, the Native Americans even knew that was a major geographic piece of land. Those artifacts were actually uncovered by archaeologists 10 years ago, trying to find more information out about Newtown. I think it was like the second largest repository of 18th century artifacts uncovered in this region from that dig. The majority of them actually came from Ferry Plantation in Virginia Beach. That's the #1 site for that sort of stuff. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I was thinking about this water. Was it fed from Chesapeake Bay?
Right, yes, all of this,
Had to go up
yeah, all of this drains.
the ocean so they could all.
Yes, ma'am. All of this is in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Now, once you go south of Kempsville, I'd say once you start getting over Providence Road, that's when you hit the ridge and it all starts to drain to the North Landing River, which then goes to the Currituck Sound. Yeah.
Go back to the point someone was making about not imagining this being a deep water port years ago. Well, we got a new slip made up here, a little paddle or a kayak landing right next to the Taco Bell that the city has just finished. And you're talking about the erosion filling in. We live in Avalon Terrace and our house backs up to the marsh that is between Avalon and Carolina Farms. And all of that area was deep water at one time. And that's where the deep water port was able to be because it was deep water before all the agricultural development, the erosion and what have you. So the point I wanted to just make was we have blessed by looking out over this marsh, and you can imagine what it was like back then with the wildlife that frequents the marshland, and just the peacefulness, the quietness. There was a train track that ran right by Emmanuel's back property here, and it went right through Avalon Terrace. And we're told that there was a brick factory where we are in our neighborhood. And that would be part of the deep water system at the time.
Yes, there was a series of kilns along the eastern branch of the Elizabeth River And the reason for that was twofold. Number one, if you're making bricks, those are heavy. You want to get those onto something something big that can move like a barge. And then also because the soils all along the eastern branch of the Elizabeth River are rich with clay, and that's what you need to produce bricks.
And it's one thing it was interesting to me at the time when we built our house, doing the footings and the foundation. The guys were using hatchets to cut the square it off and what have you. And I asked myself, why are you needing a hatchet versus just shovels or whatever? The ground is so hard, and that's where the brick factory was. When it was a brick factory. The other thing I learned recently about the walk tombstones. In Fairfield, where Block Lane crosses against Fort Dunmore, you go in just a little bit, the first court on the right hand side, like it's forest.
It's a East Fox Grove Court.
Well, the big house that's right there. It's owned by a family, and the tombstones of the walks, some of the walks are in their backyard.
Those, they were there. They were removed to Old Nation Church in the 1920s or 30s. As I said earlier, the remains are still there. They're actually called out. If you look at the subdivision plat for Fairfield, both the lot that you're referring to that has that massive oak tree,
Yes.
as well as the house behind it that was built probably about 20 years ago. Those two lots together comprise the cemetery at Fairfield.
Right.
I'm told that both of the great care was taken by the builders of those houses to avoid the portions of the lot that had the graves on them.
Right.
I can't speak to any of that. That's just what I was told. But yes, to your point, that is the location of the Walk Cemetery.
And the reason I learned this, the way I learned this, a friend of mine from our Lions Club lives in the house back of the Walk House. And there was a big discussion between the two families about a fence that was being put up. And where that fence was gonna go to protect the sites and so forth and so on. Usually, estimated for a turn circle to be up to date.
I can imagine that was quite an interesting discussion between the neighbors.
Yeah.
Our limited time, and I wish we could actually throw it open and go on, but let's get any last quick questions.
Not a question, but if I can, put in one plug. Anybody doesn't know me, I'm Frank Wakefield. I'm one of the coordinators on the historic Kempsville Family Fun Fest that's coming up now, April the 25th of this next year. We're gonna need a lot of people's participation stuff. That's one of the reasons I'd like to talk to you later. That will be the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Kempsville for this area. I don't know if you guys knew that it was supposed to be last month, but it had to get delayed. But if you didn't know about it, now you do. So, thank you.
Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
For anybody else who would like to know some of the history and go into it, if you go up here to the street, not Witch Duck, but the street just before and turn left and go to the end of the street. On the left is a park that we put up. It's a historic Kempsville. The CAC was involved in that. And we have signs up there that tells the history all the way through. It's a wonderful little park. Just walk and look at the 5 signs. And you might pick up something there too.
Well, we thank you so very much, John. Sunday, the truth telling part of BBC will be picking up on this land that we sit on and the history that literally embraces us, from the graves to the monuments to the plaques, to that kind of thing. So we hope to see you back again next Sunday. And cannot thank John enough. Thank you. And I'm sure if you've got a question that you didn't get to